If you're looking for the most absolute most ultra Android phone you can buy right now, for most countries outside the US, it really comes down to these two, the Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra and the Xiaomi 17 Ultra. These are the two most ultra slab phones from the two biggest Android OEMs in the world. After using each of these phones for just over a month now, I now have a pretty good idea on what each of these are good at and also not so good at. So in this video, I'm going to go through all the details and help you guys pick the right Ultra for you. Starting off with the hardware, which is already one of the biggest differentiators. Personally, I actually really like how the Xiaomi looks. It looks dynamic with a lot of different elements that go well together. It's built really well and solid and it stands out. But when it comes to actually holding and using these phones, the Samsung is just a more comfortable ergonomic piece of hardware with perfect weight distribution. The Xiaomi of course has this huge camera bump with a huge sensor inside, so it is pretty top heavy. And because that camera bump is so big, my finger got in the frame when I was taking photos pretty often. It's so big that Xiaomi's own magnetic wireless charger doesn't even attach perfectly and it sticks out. Both phones are made of aluminum this year, which feels very premium on both. Samsung has the S Pen though, which might be a big differentiator for some of you that use it. For connectivity, Xiaomi gives you 2 nano SIM slots in a lot of their global variants versus Samsung's single physical slot, so that part's a win for Xiaomi. Both do have eSIM support though, so that's thankfully covered. Now if you want to give a more dynamic look to your new S26 Ultra while also adding some new functionality to it, then you might want to check out the new collection of Air button cases from Pitaka. These Pitaka cases are ultra slim and light, but made with really premium feeling materials. These have aramid fiber texture, so not only do you get some extra grip with these, they just look and feel really nice in the hand. If you were worried about your Ultra feeling bulky or ugly with the case, you don't have to worry about that with these cases. But really the special part about these Air button cases versus other ones is that these actually add some new functionality with 3 buttons on the case itself, which you can map or customize to whatever shortcut or routine you want. These work via NFC, so your phone knows whenever each of these buttons were pressed, which is really cool. Since all your volume and power keys are on the right, these buttons also don't interfere with those, and you're simply just getting some extra features on your Ultra. With the Air button app, mapping these buttons is super straightforward, and you can even set up some really specific ones through modes and routines to be as personalized for you as possible. For me, I have the top button mapped for turning the ringer on or off, the middle button for quick access to my wallet app, and the bottom one for Spotify. With all these companies lately taking away our physical buttons, it's cool to have a case that adds some more tactile feel and useful shortcuts to help with my day-to-day. So yeah, if you're looking for a nice premium feel case for your new S26 Ultra, go check out Pitaka's Air button cases using my affiliate link down below. Moving over to the displays, on the Samsung you're getting that anti-reflective coating, which might be a little worse than the S25 Ultra, but it's still very practical and helpful. Another practical feature is the privacy display. It makes me feel much safer about checking my banking apps and sensitive stuff when I'm outside. It also has a much higher pixel density at around 500 ppi compared to Xiaomi's 416 ppi. So for things like reading text or really high quality movie scenes, the Samsung does look sharper with more texture and detail. Xiaomi counters that with a 12-bit panel while Samsung is still on a 8-bit panel. Now honestly, you really won't see much of a difference in your day-to-day, but when you are watching HDR content, you can notice it. I noticed that the Xiaomi handles HDR content much better. On the Samsung, sometimes the bright white spots can look a bit harsh and it almost hurts my eyes. Xiaomi feels easier on the eyes, the skin color reproduction is more accurate, and you can just see more shades of light. It's also got the 2160Hz PWM dimming, which is great for eye comfort. With that said, even though Xiaomi has a higher peak brightness, in real world usage, I didn't really see a difference. Both are great in direct sunlight. For the speakers, the Xiaomi wins this hands down. The sound is much cleaner. Samsung does have better tuning than last year, but it still feels like there's a bit too much treble and it sounds a little too digital. Xiaomi's vocals and instruments are clearer, and the bass actually has some impact without being too much. Samsung's bass just feels a bit weak in comparison. Okay, let's talk cameras, which should be one of the biggest deals in this whole comparison. This is actually where the on-paper differences are the craziest. Xiaomi is using a massive 1-inch main sensor and a huge periscope with continuous zoom from 3.2 to 4.3x, while Samsung is still on a much smaller 1/1.3-inch main and much smaller telephoto lenses. From the specs alone, the gap is huge, and I'd much rather have that one big variable periscope lens than Samsung's 2 telephoto system with a very weak 3x tele lens. In terms of image quality, Xiaomi is honestly in a different league when it comes to the professional look. Because of that massive hardware, you get way more detail and a softer, more natural look with less digital sharpening and grain. Whether it's the ultra-wide or the main lens, the contrast is deep and dramatic, the dynamic range is just better, it handles tough lighting much better, and the color reproduction is smarter. It knows when to boost the focus, the colors, and to tune down the background. But the telephoto comparison is where the difference is actually the most dramatic. This is where you see the gap between a smartphone camera and a real camera. At 3x, it's a total wash. Xiaomi's 3.2x optical zoom is just so much better because the sensor size gives you actual background blur that makes Samsung's results look very flat. Once you go longer to 4.3x and beyond, Xiaomi's 8.6x zoom is much clearer and cleaner than Samsung's 10x. Xiaomi's periscope feels like you're shooting on a mirrorless camera, whereas the Samsung still looks very much like a smartphone. That said, it isn't a total blowout because Samsung wins on some of the polished elements. Samsung's post-processing goes for a much more balanced look with the shadows lifted. This is that social media look that most people are actually going to prefer on the first glance. In low light, Samsung actually takes a win for me in a lot of the situations. Xiaomi's deep contrast looks cool, but it goes a little bit overboard with the moody look, making scenes look way darker than they actually were. Samsung's low light photos are much more accurate to the situation. Samsung also wins on video processing. Even with the smaller sensors, the S26 Ultra has much smoother stabilization and cleaner footage, especially when you're using that 5x periscope. The more I use the S26 Ultra, the more I realize that Samsung really is the undisputed king of video recording in the smartphone market, even though it is falling behind with still images. Last but not least, Samsung also takes much better selfies. The skin tones are way more accurate, Xiaomi makes me look a little bit too red, and Samsung handles the highlights way better too, whereas the Xiaomi turns my hair into one black blob. Plus, the selfie video stabilization and the auto lighting on the S26 Ultra are just much better for vlogging too. So if you are a type of person that just likes to point and shoot and get a nice bright photo that's balanced and even for Instagram, then you're actually going to like the Samsung a little more. It's reliable, the video is really smooth and clean, and it handles people photos like the selfies in more flattering ways. But if you are an enthusiast or an aspiring photographer, the Xiaomi is just way more capable. With that 1-inch sensor and variable zoom on that periscope, you can really maximize the results you get from a phone. The raw workflow is also miles ahead. It's way faster to capture, faster to process. You can still use all your Leica filters too. Honestly, the raw photos I've taken on the Xiaomi are the best I've ever seen from a smartphone. For me though, the real camera experience really makes a huge difference for me because this is the only thing I need to carry. I don't need to carry a separate camera with me. Now the software is where that experience kind of flips. One UI 8.5 is just more capable, consistent, and approachable with practical, useful features like modes and routines, all kinds of multitasking options and gestures in Galaxy AI. HyperOS 3.0 has really nice looking animations, and I like the dynamic island copy better than Samsung's Now bar, but the overall UI is missing a ton of features including automations, the AI implementations just feel subpar, and the settings and the options feel disorganized. Between the ads in the wallpaper carousel, the outdated looking software store, and having to use third-party apps to enable basic things like extra dim mode, it just isn't nearly as polished. In terms of the performance, you're basically getting the same since you have top tier specs on both phones, where the Xiaomi does feel faster as a camera response, but for everything else like video export times and gaming, they're basically identical. The only real difference in the internals is the thermals. The Galaxy takes a lot hotter much quicker, whereas Xiaomi's temperatures take a few minutes to catch up, but it's really not that noticeable of a difference. So yeah, while the raw performance is basically the same, the overall software experience and polish makes One UI and the Samsung phone feel like a much more complete package. In terms of battery, Xiaomi has a much larger 6000 mAh battery compared to Samsung's 5000 mAh, but surprisingly, I actually get better battery life on the S26 Ultra. I was getting about 6.5 to 7.5 hours of screen on time on the Samsung. On the Xiaomi, it was more like 5 to 5.5 hours. For me, that battery trade-off is worth it for the camera alone, but if you just want a phone that lasts as long as possible, Samsung is the better optimized experience. Charging is also another weird one. Xiaomi supports 90-watt wired charging while Samsung peaks at 60 watts, but in my test, the Samsung actually got a full charge faster, under 50 minutes. The Xiaomi took over 60 minutes unless I use the specific boost mode, which I usually don't do. This does make sense since Xiaomi does have a much bigger battery, but considering the faster overall charging speed from 0 to 100 on the Samsung and also the better day-to-day battery life I get on this, for the battery life and charging, the Samsung surprisingly gets the win here. So yeah, at the same $1,300 to $1,800 price point depending on where you're at, you are technically getting more value with Xiaomi for the extra RAM, storage, and that massive camera hardware. If you are a creator like me, the Xiaomi 17 Ultra is an incredible tool and the phone I want to carry for those sensors alone. But for most people, I actually recommend the S26 Ultra. It's super reliable, great ergonomics, and that screen and the privacy display are just better and more practical for the day-to-day. With all that said though, even though the S26 Ultra is the more polished product all around and I do recommend it to more people, personally, I'm keeping the Xiaomi 17 Ultra as my daily driver. I just really enjoy using the camera more here, and that's enough to make it my personal choice. But yeah, I want to know what you guys think. What do you value more and which phone would you use? Let me know down in the comments. This was definitely a very fun comparison. If you want more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to support the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.